bum 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 bum
Bum bum bum.
Well, good morning, Jonathan.
Good morning, Father Jeff.
I hear that morning has broken.
It has broken.
It has broken, and we are your consecrated hosts, Father Jeff, consecrated by holy orders.
Jonathan, consecrated by baptism and confirmation.
And a few things. You're a holy man, Jonathan. Or
Uh,
at least you play one on TV. Oh, well, if you enjoyed yesterday's show, today is going to be nothing like it.
or the day before.
We're just going to be
We've
here
had
today.
different camera angles for
Oh
two
my
shows in a
gosh,
row,
yeah,
and it's
Today's kind of, Jonathan's being a little lazy today. One camera.
one camera, no special effects.
No, we're not going anywhere today. We're just kind of sticking around. But we're going to talk to you. How many people made carbonara last night? Show of hands. I think we had a couple pictures come in, or at least one picture
we had at
come
least
in.
one picture. The Herber's family
That they made the carbonara yesterday.
And it looks-
Did they say how it turned out? Did they enjoy it?
They just showed. I think it was the before eating picture.
The before eating picture. We don't know if it actually was good.
It looked pretty good to me.
It did look pretty tasty. That's a good pasta.
But there's several people that either said they were cooking it last night or were getting the ingredients to make it tonight.
So the news is Hy-Vee's shelves are cleared of pasta, bacon, and eggs.
And no more Romano or Parmesan cheese. You can get any other kind of cheese.
That's right. Cheddar, it's there.
Munster,
Velveeta.
that's not cheese.
a little cheese process. Tonight's dinner plan. Karen's gonna have that. Awesome.
I think you even sold some cookbooks yesterday. So we should. I mean, you should have gotten a link so you
I
could
should
have
get
gotten
a
some
cut.
commission.
I should have gotten a cut on that if anybody bought that cookbook. I like that cookbook. There's probably other ones out there, but those pastas, I don't make a
that's
whole
the
lot of
only
other
cookbook.
things in there. It's the only cookbook.
It's only
There's
Italian
only
cookbook.
it's the only Italian cookbook out there. There may be other ones. I don't know, but yeah, that's a good one. That was tasty. That was a good. I definitely was satisfied after having that yesterday.
It was so good.
It was very good. You take some home?
Mm-hmm.
Did it make it home, or did you eat it on the
It
way?
made it home. It made it home. Genevieve loved it.
Awesome. My mom bought the cookbook. Well, don't give it to me as a gift because I already got one. Well, it's windy outside today.
Oh my! I thought the church building, everything here might have been gone because that wind was strong.
It is crazy windy here, but it's typically it is it's windy up here. So
Yeah, we're kind of at the top of a hill, so we get all the crosswinds and all the wind.
Everything.
Anything. It's always
everything and
blowing.
anything. But it is Wednesday. What is today's date?
April 29th.
April 29th. This is our 29th episode of Morning Has Broken. We were just doing a little walk down memory lane, looking back at episode 1.
Numero uno.
All those 6 weeks ago.
We didn't know what we were doing.
We didn't know what we were doing. Not that we do any still, but it was painful to watch.
Yeah.
It was a little painful. Yeah, so what'd you do last night, Jonathan?
What did I do last night?
Nothing.
I mowed the lawn.
Ooh.
Because
You
it
were
was
worried
supposed to
was gonna
rain. And it never rained. But I mowed my backyard.
Mm-hmm.
So that was something. What did we do? What did we have for dinner?
You know, remember? I don't even remember what I didn't have dinner last night.
Oh, fasting, huh?
I just had a little snack when I went home from the office, and that was late. It was like 6 o'clock already. That's too early for supper for me. I tend to eat rather late. Supper after 7-ish.
We're usually eating right around the time of the litany.
Ah, so about 7-ish.
Yeah. So you interrupt our dinner pretty much nightly.
It's what I do. I try to...
But, yeah, I think we just did some stuff around the house. It wasn't
just a day.
Just a day.
Just a day. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So today we have a saint.
We do have a saint today. Saint Catherine of Siena.
A doctor of the church.
She is one of the doctors of the church. There's only like about 3 declared doctors of the church, and these are not people who run around with stethoscopes. These are doctors in the sense that they are teachers of the church. Also, not that they had a degree.
Right.
But that they were really considered teachers of the church because they understood the depths of the mysteries of God and somehow communicated that to the church in a special way.
Right, because St. Catherine of Siena actually wasn't very educated for a long
No,
time.
and she was like one of 20-some kids. I mean, I don't remember how many of those kids actually survived, but because it was, during the 14th century. So Catherine lived during the 14th century, and she was one of 20-some kids, but I think only like 16 or 17 survived.
Only 16 or 17.
Only 16 or 17 survived. It was back in the day.
Right.
And, one of the things Catherine was known for was tending to plague victims.
That's right.
She's an intercessor against plague. So she is a perfect saint to lift up today and to be asking help from.
That and headaches, right? Something like that?
Against headaches, yeah. So she's an amazing woman because she must have been one of those girls that was also kind of sort of annoying. Because I don't think she was terribly popular. And in fact, people didn't really want to be around her, I don't think, a whole heck of a lot. I'm just saying, just because you're a saint doesn't mean you're warm and fuzzy. She wrote some pretty strong letters to the Pope.
Yes.
Who at that time had moved from Rome to Avignon because France, the countryside of France, was much more delightful place to live in than was the dirty, nasty city of Rome.
I've been to Avignon, and it's a pleasant place.
I've not been there, but I imagine it would be. Smelling the lavender in the fields and the wine pouring off of the hills and eating the...
That wasn't my experience of France, but...
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, so she kind of stirred some things up. She gave the Pope a talking to every now and again, trying to convince him to move back to Rome. It bothered her deeply that the popes had been ruling the church from France as opposed to Rome, and says, you are Peter's successor and Peter died in Rome. Why don't you get back to Rome? So she, And then when she died, her own city, Siena, didn't want her. It's like, she died in Rome, and they were like, do you want her back? We'll bury her there. And they're like, no, you keep her in Rome because she was annoying. And then she got canonized as a saint, and then the Sienese were like, oh, Catherine, she's our favorite girl. We want her to be buried here. And the Romans were like, she's here. So they compromised, and they cut off her head, and they sent her head to Siena, and her body remains in Rome. So, yes, the holy head of St. Catherine is not only in Siena, but it is on display in a crystal box.
Does she happen to be an incorruptible?
No.
All right.
So it is quite the image. It's a little creepy, but boy, it's like, wow, that is Catherine of Siena. I know I've taken a few pilgrimages to Italy, and Siena is always on the stop, and so we have seen and venerated the holy head of St. Catherine. And then in Rome, her body is under the altar there near the Pantheon. So it's right there in the heart of the city. So we also catch the other half of her. It's one of those things that crazy Catholics do. So
yeah,
the saints, they're everywhere.
Saints are everywhere,
literally and spiritually. Oh, so Catherine of Siena, we invoke her today as someone who rights the ship of the church and makes sure it's going the right direction, and as someone who cared for the sick and those enduring plague, that she will be a powerful intercessor for us.
Amen. That would be perfect timing.
Yeah. So it's an obligatory memorial, which means that when you celebrate Mass with public, you must celebrate this feast day unless there's some overarching good reason not to. So St. Catherine of Siena will be offered, we will celebrate Mass in memory of her today.
Very cool.
Yeah, awesome.
So we have a backlog of a ton of questions.
We do. We asked you for your questions.
And then we never answered any
and then you put them, but we were writing them down. We made sure we had them all. And so you asked questions in previous episodes that we never had a chance to quite get to. So today, ketchup day. This is our odds and ends kind of day.
We should have had a bottle of ketchup.
We should have had a bottle of ketchup.
Well, like I told you, no special effects.
No special effects today.
You just get us.
It's just us. So we do have a few questions today. So let's see. What should I believe we were talking? So yesterday we were talking about, or 2 days ago when Thomas was here, we were talking about formation for the priesthood and seminary and all of those sorts of things. And someone asked a question about deacons. What's the formation? How does one become a deacon? What's the formation for a deacon, etc., etc. So since the Second Vatican Council, the orders of clerics changed. So up until that time, there were like 9 orders of clerics. Wow. So you started with tonsure, which is where you got your hair cut to make the little bald spot on your head, and that's when you became a cleric. And then you were the porter, the guy who guarded the door.
Not the beard maker.
No, not a dark beard. you were the doorman, basically, the porter. And then there was like an exorcist and a lector and a acolyte and a subdeacon and a deacon and a priest and a bishop.
Oh man!
So there were a lot of orders, and you were like ordained to all of these different things. Things got simplified after the Second Vatican Council to 2 major orders, and those 2 major orders are the priesthood and the diaconate. I guess the episcopacy, the bishop, the priest, and the deacon. So there are three major orders, and then the minor orders were dissolved, and lector and acolyte were turned into lay ministries. That you could enter into this ministry service in the church, but you weren't ordained anymore to be an acolyte. You weren't ordained anymore to be a lector.
Got it. We were just what's the word? Because when I got my lector training, I had to be commissioned. Mandated.
Yes, but that's different. There's the commissioning or the mandation of lay readers, and then there's the installation of lectors. So most people, especially in the Archdiocese of Omaha, are lay readers. In order to be an installed lector, it is you go through formation, a little training. The ministries of lector and acolyte, because they used to be ordained things, are reserved only for men. And so men can be lectors, they can be acolytes. Some dioceses, I believe the Diocese of Lincoln, still installs lectors and acolytes. And so, so there is a difference.
Okay. In
the absence of an installed lector, a mandated reader may perform the readings at Mass.
Got it.
So there's all kinds of things. But anyway, back to deacons. So deacons, there's really kind of 2 kinds of deacons, if you will. There are the permanent deacons and the transitional deacons. So basically, there's no difference. A deacon is a deacon is a deacon. But it's just you intend to remain a deacon throughout your life, or are you on your way to priesthood?
Got it.
So in order to be ordained a priest, you must first be ordained a deacon.
Yep.
And you must be ordained a deacon for at least 6 months before you're ordained a priest.
And at that point, can you no longer get married? Okay,
so that question of marriage and ordination, these 2 vocations that are kind of side by side and overlap a little bit. So the law of the church has always been that once you are ordained, you may not marry. So if you're ordained a priest, if you're ordained a deacon, you may not marry after ordination. However, you may be married and be then ordained. So a married man could be ordained as a deacon. A married man could be ordained even as a priest. But once, if your spouse, if your wife should die, you cannot marry again because now you're ordained and there's no marriage after ordination. So ordination is kind of a stopgap, but both married and single persons can be ordained. Once you're married, once you're ordained, you cannot be married.
Got it. So you can be ordained and then become a priest?
Say that again, Jonathan?
I mean, you can be married, and then because you have to be ordained to become a priest. You have to be, but you can be married to become a priest?
Yes. In the Eastern Catholic churches and the Orthodox churches, married men are permitted to be ordained priests. In the Roman Catholic Church, married men may be ordained priest, but only with dispensation from the Holy Father. So the Pope himself has to intervene in that case. So if a bishop, and most of the time when this happens is, let's say, a Lutheran pastor converts and becomes Catholic. He and his family become Catholic, his wife and kids, they all become Catholic, and he realizes, oh my gosh, I think I've always had a call to the priesthood, but because I was Lutheran, I didn't realize it was the priesthood, and so I became a Lutheran minister. Now that I'm Catholic, I still feel this call to ministry, and I would like to become a Catholic priest. And so his bishop, if the bishop would agree, would write to the Holy Father and basically say, hey, I've got this guy who was a minister. I would like to ordain him as a priest, and that would be a totally different, and then they would be able to do that with the Holy Father's permission.
Would they still have to go through seminary and all that jazz?
Absolutely. They still have to go through formation and whatnot.
Got it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a tough thing. Married priesthood is a very tough thing, and anybody who has talked to guys that are married priesthood knows the struggles with that, because as a married man and as a priest, it's really, really hard to balance those two things.
I've thought of the diaconate, but even balancing the duties you have as a deacon with having a family with young kids, I can't imagine a priest.
Being a husband calls you to be completely and totally given to your wife and your kids. Being a priest means that you are completely and totally given to the parish, to the church. And so if you try to blend those, one of them is always going to suffer. And I know many, I've got a number of married men who are priests who used to be Protestant men who were priests, or Protestant men who were ordained and then became Catholic priests. And there's a real tension and there is a struggle. And it's not easy when your kids have soccer, when your kids are trying to study at home, especially in quarantine now in school. And it's really tough to make it work. It's also tough to provide a living wage for a family. It's tough to move them. I mean, you start thinking of all of the practicals that go with this.
Because I guess a married priest still have to move every 5 to 10 years.
Well, it becomes much more difficult to do that. It becomes much more difficult to do that if you have married clergy. So it really, one of the things that I did a theology night on priesthood and marriage some time ago. So if you visit our YouTube page,
which you should also subscribe to,
which you should subscribe
and
to,
share, get other people to subscribe.
That I think it kind of, in explaining that, it was really, I think, the first time where I was able to really talk about that in depth and the balance between really both vocations have a nuptial mystery intertwined with them. That as a priest, you have to step into the person of Jesus Christ, the bridegroom, who takes the church undivided as his bride. Undivided love has to go to the bride, to the church. And the same thing happens in marriage between a husband and wife, that you give yourself totally and completely. This is why even in the diaconate, if a married man is going to be ordained a deacon, he must have permission from his wife in order to be ordained, because he is no longer going to be able to give himself completely to that marriage. And that's why many men do not become deacons until their kids are raised and out of the house, because it's just too difficult, practically speaking.
Sure.
Not to mention spiritually, the conflicting. I would never want to mix those two vocations. It would be a nightmare for me, and I think the parish would suffer too, because you would find that you would have a 9 to 5 priest.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough.
We had a quick question on, specifically with Thomas. Sonny asked, if he finishes 4 years more after this year,
Correct.
when would he become a deacon?
You're usually ordained a deacon in your 7th year of seminary. So if you do 4 years of college, and then you have 4 years of seminary after college. So in the first year, you kind of enter into major seminary. The second year, you're installed a lector. The third year, you're installed an acolyte. The fourth year, you become a deacon. And then at the end of your 4th year, you are ordained a priest. If everything continues.
So usually it's the summer, because at least in this diocese, archdiocese, all of the ordinations happen in the summer.
Correct.
And so usually it's the summer prior to your ordination as a priest, you get ordained a bishop.
A deacon.
I took some allergy medicine before this, and so my head's a little bit spaghetti. Yeah, you get ordained a bishop before you get ordained a priest.
Yeah, you know it happens all the time.
You get ordained a deacon the summer before your ordination as a priest.
Correct. So,
oh my goodness gracious.
Yeah, that's what happens. So the diaconate precedes the presbyterate, and typically at the end of May, we would ordain our deacons before they go into their last summer assignment before seminary. I don't know when that's going to happen this year. The Archbishop kind of told us that everything is kind of right now, it's still in the calendar, but it's not a hard go. We don't know if the ordinations will happen a little later in the summer, or if restrictions are going to be raised enough where we would be able to have a decent celebration of those ordinations. Sure. So we'll just kind of see.
And one of the reasons for that, because if it's just the ordination of a priest, then that would be, you could do that really at any time. But so much of the ordination of a priest is communal, and there's all these sorts of blessings.
The whole body of the other priests are there. So
yes.
The whole presbyterate gathers, and if you spread us out in the church, no one else can be in the cathedral.
Right, so no friends or family, and
it would be kind of tough.
There's a celebration of first masses, which is a whole other thing. We can get into this some other time, because
Yeah.
we have a lot of questions, and time is running out.
It's amazing how long these things go. So we have talked about a lot of this stuff in some of our YouTube videos, and so head on that way, and you can find a lot of those things.
Genevieve said I get a little loopy on allergy meds, and she's not wrong.
Yeah, apparently. All right.
So
that ties into a question that we had a while back when we were talking about The Chosen.
Yes.
The series.
Mm-hmm.
And that in that, very prominently, Peter is portrayed as having a wife.
Right.
Prior to his call. And we know that he was married. The scriptures say that Jesus visited Peter's house, and Peter's mother-in-law was there sick.
Hard to have a mother-in-law if you don't have a wife.
It is hard to... I'm not sure you would want that. So, yeah, we know that Peter was married, but it seems that his wife must have died somewhere along the way. The fact that it's Peter's mother-in-law that after she is healed and she gets up to then provide the hospitality for the men there tells us that there was not another woman in that household. So Peter's wife appears to have disappeared somewhere early on in his life, and that he didn't remarry. It's only what we can speculate from the scriptures and knowing how culture worked back in that time.
Those things wouldn't have made sense.
It would not have made sense that if they would have arrived, Peter's mother-in-law would not have been healed and then jumped up to do the hospitality, that Peter's wife would have been there to handle the hospitality. Right. So Peter's wife must have been out of the picture already, probably by death, by the time that he was called as an apostle. Because we know that the apostles were not married. They went off in every direction after that and were not bound by marriage. The Lord would not have called people to be ripped apart from their families. That doesn't make sense.
Kind of goes against everything.
Kind of goes against, what love and charity are really about.
So, love and charity, Father Jeff.
Speaking of love and charity, that was another question. Look at how these things just flow right together.
Goodness.
It's almost as if we planned it. And we didn't. I mean, that's the funny thing.
Are they the same Are they different? Because we see them interchanged a lot, but...
Charity is another word for love.
It's kind of love in action.
But it's a particular... Yeah. English is very deprived when it comes to what love means. That in, I guess at its base definition, love is to desire and will the good of another. Right. That I want your good. And so that if I want your good, that is what love is.
Regardless of how it affects you.
Regardless, if I have to sacrifice myself for this other person, I want your good. And that is what love is. Charity is typically, I would say, more often described as love than in action. So it's not just the willing it, but it's also the expression of that will. That you put that will into action.
Doing something for your good.
Absolutely.
Because I could will someone's, the people in India, I will their good.
I want their good, yeah.
And I'm not doing anything.
And that's different than charity.
Right. Charity is me going over there, serving somehow, doing something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. I love you, I want your good, but am I actually reaching out? Am I actually doing something for them?
And both of them can be difficult at any time.
Absolutely.
So...
Yeah, it's one thing to say you love someone, it's another thing to show that you love someone.
That's very
and
true.
So charity is love in action.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's what I would say. Charity is more the love that we see expressed by God. It's love in action. We kind of, I guess, talked about acolytes.
We did.
Someone asked the other day about the difference between altar servers and acolytes. And again, an acolyte is an installed ministry. It used to be an ordained ministry, and it was kind of on the way to being a subdeacon, a deacon, a priest. And then that has now been reserved as an installed ministry. So it become basically an acolyte is the deacon's assistant at the altar. And it is something that is installed by the bishop to someone who is to a man who's been formed to become that. And they basically prepare the altar. They prepare the gifts for the deacon. They can purify and clean after the celebration of Mass. They are permitted to distribute Holy Communion, to take communion to the sick. And so in the absence of acolytes, you may have extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion to help distribute communion, or you may have other people who are servers at the altar to do these things. So an acolyte is basically a subdeacon in some sense.
We need to take a tour through different roles.
We could do that.
Because I know there's a Lucifer. Is that right? Is that
well,
correct?
That would be Satan.
No, but no. I've heard that there's Lucifers. Those are the light bearers.
Yes. So technically, the thurifer is the guy who carries the incense thurible. The crucifer is the guy who carries the cross. The lucifers, or the lucifers, are the ones who carry the lights, or the torches.
See, I'm not crazy.
You are not quite crazy.
But that would be, it's almost like setting up a chessboard,
There's many different, there's all these different roles so that liturgy is ordered and flows well. Because there's nothing worse than a distraction. You can't really enter into that prayer if everything is wonky and distracting.
This will be a great reason for this all to end so that you don't have to see me anymore.
Oh, Jonathan, I dream of the day. Oh, well, we're going to be doing this for some time because things are not going to get back to normal just like that. We know that. That raises a question about Sunday Mass then and holy days and things like that. Right. I know that the Archbishop has already agreed to extend the dispensation of the obligation to attend Sunday Mass and Holy Day Masses.
Right.
So one of the things that we recognize as Catholics is that we cannot not be at Mass. that is the moment when Jesus suffers, dies, and rises from the dead for your salvation, and for you to say, that's not important for me to show up on the Lord's day, on this day that he rose from the dead, that I don't want to participate in that becomes mortally sinful. That's a deadly sin that separates us from the very thing that saves us.
Because Sunday Mass is the most significant thing that we do every week.
It is the most significant
There's
thing
nothing.
we do. There's nothing.
It's the source and summit of our faith.
It's not even what we do. It's what God does for us.
Amen. So yeah, it's the source. The receiving the Eucharist is the source and summit. The Eucharist is the source and summit of our faith. And Sunday liturgy is the high point of that.
Yes. Everything leads to it. Everything flows from it.
And so there is nothing, no baseball, no anything that we do work. If we don't go to Sunday Mass, it's all for nothing.
Don't bother. Don't bother living. I mean, now, there are legitimate reasons not to be at Mass. If you are sick, if you are literally sick, or if you are caring for someone who is sick and you cannot leave them. If there's no way that you can get to church, because maybe you don't drive, or maybe you're older and you don't have anyone to take you.
Or maybe you live in some rural village in Africa that doesn't have a priest.
So there, the obligation, the Lord doesn't expect from us things that are impossible. And so if Sunday Mass is impossible for you, or not right for you, or not good, then the Lord would not desire that for you.
Right.
And so the Archbishop realizes that during this time, there are people that it would be a bad idea to be out and about and exposing yourself and exposing others. So he is content to dispense from the obligation. Even though you're not sick, there is a real danger of getting seriously sick.
Right.
And that is not a good thing. And so that if I will your good, I don't want that. I don't want you to be separated from the sacraments, but I also don't want to put your life in danger like that.
Amen.
And so the Archbishop is going to continue the general dispensation for the Archdiocese of Omaha and the Diocese of Lincoln until we know.
But we will still be live streaming at least one Mass.
We will still be live streaming our daily Mass and one of the Sunday Masses, so that as people return to church, they will participate. But we will also then, if you can't participate, you can participate with us. The Mass for Shut-ins is going on. EWTN and other services also provide Masses as well that you can at least participate in some way.
And that the receiving of the graces and everything else that we've talked about in prior shows, you can go back and watch them, even if they're cringeworthy. You will still receive all the graces. Even doing the spiritual communion, you receive the graces.
The fruits of that sacrament are available when that's the only way that you can receive that.
So don't feel pressured if you're uncomfortable or anything like that. It's great
right.
that it's being opened up and that people will be able to join us, but we don't want you to get sick or even die.
Absolutely.
I mean, that would be...
And so there will be some pretty strict measures that even when churches do open up next Monday on the 4th, so nothing this weekend. Don't go showing up to church this weekend.
Nope.
On Monday the 4th, that will be the first day that churches are open and available, that I think we'll be sending something out in the next day or two to all of our parishioners that kind of go through the list of, all right, folks, here's how Mass is going to work. Here's what you can do and what you shouldn't be doing. Here's who you should touch and who you shouldn't be touching. And all of those sorts of things. So we're going to have some, we just want to maintain social distancing and just be responsible.
Right. And then we'll just ask for your patience and
Yeah.
cooperation through it
It's
all.
going to be another new normal.
It'll be a little bit messy at first until we get the hang of things, but
Absolutely.
We all want the good, and we all want to be able to come together as soon as possible, and for no one to get sick.
Yeah, but don't rush it if you shouldn't be.
Amen.
That's important. So a couple of notes about the things coming up this week before we close today. Once again, we will have First Friday exposition, and we will live stream at 7 o'clock the exposition of the Blessed Sacrament, because I will do the Litany of Saints on Friday at 7 from the church here at St. Charles before the Blessed Sacrament. Then the Eucharist will be exposed overnight until 11:30 Saturday morning. We do have some sign-ups, and you can go on our website, 10 persons still max in church during that time.
Right. So please don't just show up. Be sure to
You
use
do
that,
have to have a reservation.
the Sign Up Genius, sign up so that you can come in and adore.
And so there are some spaces left overnight if you want to come and spend some time with the Lord. On Saturday, then, we will pray the Litany of Saints to conclude adoration, and that will happen at 11:30 when benediction is given. We will live stream that again. That will be the final praying of the Litany of Saints together.
Say it ain't so.
I know. We have, I looked, and since we began the Litany of Saints, that will be the 40th time that we have prayed the Litany of Saints together. We took off for the statewide rosary. We took off for Triduum for Holy Thursday through Easter Sunday. And so 40 days praying the Litany of Saints together. That is a significant number in the Bible. And so we are going to honor that by praying our last two Litany of the Saints before the Blessed Sacrament in church. And then I encourage everyone to continue to offer the Litany of the Saints with your families together through the rest of this pandemic.
Right.
And I think we'll create a video, so if you want to do that with me, we will have the video available so that you can pull that up nightly.
Right. We'll get that up on YouTube.
Yeah. So that's how we will conclude the litany. And finally, Friday at 3 p.m., our devotion will be a crowning of the statue of the Blessed Virgin Mary in church. That will be live streamed. And then we will have vases available, so anybody here in the parish, if you want to make a visit to the church after 3 o'clock, you can bring flowers by and leave them at the statue. Or if you're coming to adoration overnight, you can do that at the statue of the Blessed Virgin.
Cool.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
I think that's all for today.
It's almost 11 o'clock. It's almost time for noon mass.
Well, we got a little time. You guys have a wonderful day. Don't blow away in the wind. And we will see you later. And if you're making carbonara, good luck and buon appetito. Enjoy.